As you stated, my name is Dr. Sabrina Dent. I worked hard to earn the credentials. So, Dr. Sabrina Dent, and I do serve as the Senior Faith Advisor for Americans United for Separation of Church and State. And Americans United is a nonpartisan educational and advocacy organization, and we're dedicated to advancing the separation of religion and government as the only way to ensure the freedom of religion, including the right to believe or not to believe for all people. And we believe also that that religion should never be used to dictate public policy, and discrimination is not justified under the guise of religion. So today, I'm going to be speaking from the topic religious freedom for all or none. So the United States is a racially, culturally, ethnically, and religiously diverse nation. We're comprised of a beautiful tapestry of people that come from many backgrounds, as well as religious traditions and identities. According to Pew Research Center, it has shown in the last 30 years that the religious landscape in America has changed, and it will continue to change. For example, there has been an increase in the number of people who identify as religiously unaffiliated, meaning they do not necessarily profess to be a part of any organized religious community. And then also there's an increase in the number of nones, meaning N-O-N-E-S, those individuals who identify as atheists, free thinkers, humanists, as well as secular individuals. And these numbers are higher among young adults between the ages of 18 to 29 years old, which is around 39% in comparison to senior individuals, which is only 13%. It's also important to note in my sharing that the Public Religion Research Institute has conducted many surveys over the recent years to show how there has been a decline in certain groups, such as there's been a decline in those that identify as white and Christian, specifically with the Protestant tradition. Now is only 43% of Americans that identify as such. And there is an increase in the number of non-Christian religious groups, but they still account for less than 1% of the population. That is, whether they are Jewish, whether they're Muslim, Baha'i, those numbers are much smaller. So you might ask the question, like, why do these statistics matter? I think they matter because there are complexities that come with our religious identities and all of our many identities. At the same time, I think it's a concern because in 2019, one of the things that came forth in the Public Religion Research's study that they conducted was that respondents thought that small business owners should have the right to refuse services to individuals based on maybe their sexual identity, their religious beliefs, or even their race. 15% of the respondents actually said that they felt that people could be discriminated against or refuse services because of the small business owners' beliefs. But what is hopeful for us is that we do have the First Amendment here in the United States. And the first 16 words of the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution reads that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So it points out the two important clauses, which are significant, which are the free exercise clause and the establishment clause. So the free exercise clause pretty much states that everyone has the right to choose and practice their beliefs as they choose, and they have the right to change their religion according to their conscience without government interference or discrimination. It also implies that the government must be fair in the treatment of all people, no matter what a person believes or doesn't believe. It also emphasizes that there should be the separation of religion and government, which outlines that the government cannot show preference towards one religious group or another. Therefore, the U.S. cannot profess a state-sanctioned religion. But we can't forget the history behind this. And so, from the lens of a Black woman in America, we must remember that when this was established, that enslaved Africans were not given the right to practice their religions or to embody their spiritual practices. And 30% of the enslaved Africans identified as Muslims, also Yoruba practitioners, or even other religious traditions that they brought with them. And involuntarily they had to come to America. They were brought to America. So we must acknowledge that there is religious diversity in America, and there has always been religious diversity in America. Yet there continues to be threats of violence towards many different groups in America, based on their religious identity and sometimes their racial identity. And it shows up in many ways. It shows up in public policies about prioritizing the funding of private religious schools with taxpayer money instead of using taxpayer funds to fund public schools. And then at the same time, it shows up in terms of like the private voucher programs. And what I want people to know is that they must remember that private voucher programs were created in response to desegregation orders in the 50s and 60s. That this was a way, again, of maintaining the segregation. So when we're talking about religious freedom in America, we must look at the intersectionality of identities that impact many different people. And then also to keep in mind when we're talking about private schools, that gives way for discrimination to take place based on what an employee of a private religious institution may or may not believe. So again, to affirm that religion and religious freedom should never be used as a weapon or a tool to discriminate each other, or any person, and that in its truest essence, religious freedom is a shield that protects all people. And so you can learn more about our work at Americans United and what we do to fight on behalf of all Americans, those with a religious belief system and those that do not. But at the end of the day, what I want people to recognize is that it is important that we recognize that religious freedom is not just a constitutional right, but it is a human right that affirms the human dignity of every person and their right to choose or not to choose. And that we have an obligation to protect and guard this right, not just for ourselves, but for our neighbors in this beautiful tapestry of America in which we live. And that I do affirm that human rights is worth the fight.